Good evening or good morning to some of you who are joining us from abroad. I have the privilege of serving as the Director of Admission. My name is Anna Crouch, and this is my 11th year here at Mercersburg Academy. I'm coming to you tonight from my apartment in the third floor of a girls' dorm. So if you hear some shrieks in the hallway, it's the girls who are always excited for this time of night to come together after a long day. And it's raining here in Pennsylvania today. I don't know about where you are, but we've had a dreary day after beautiful fall weather. So we are, of course, disappointed that we're not able to speak to you in person today or see you on our campus right now. So much is different right now for our admission cycle, and we know for your life in general. And so our hope tonight is to really share with you more information about all the programs that we offer at Mercersburg and give you a sense of what our community is like. We know that that is so important as you try to navigate this boarding school search process to really understand what each school that you're applying to is like, why you would choose Mercersburg over another school. And so our hope tonight is to address all the questions you have. Thank you for submitting so many great questions in advance. And we're excited to address all your questions that you ask here tonight too. So we're hopeful that at some point this year we'll get to see you in person, but we really hope that at the very least we're able to connect you with students and other faculty members to help address the questions that you have. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our head of school, Katie Titus, who normally for big events and open houses, she would be introducing you all in our assignment theater. And so I'll let her introduce herself over Zoom tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Anna. Hi, everybody. As Anna said, I'm Katie Titus. I am in my fifth year as the head of school at Mercersburg Academy. I'm actually a current parent and a past parent as well, so I've got that perspective. And I think I want to just start by acknowledging and saying thank you to all of you who took the time to join us tonight, and to recognize that think about it, like in the room with us this evening, that we've got probably folks who fall into three different categories. And that first category is, I'm absolutely certain that I want to go to boarding school and I just want to learn more about Mercersburg. There's probably a second category of you out there who are thinking, okay, I think I'm interested in boarding school, but I'm not really sure. And I'm also looking at schools in my local area. And there's probably a third group out there who are just beginning to even explore what boarding school is all about. And so, our job tonight is to give you an authentic sense of Mercersburg so that you can walk away having at least a good idea of what our community is all about. I often get asked the question, the head of school is, what makes Mercersburg so unique and special? And one data point that I love to share, because I think it really means something, is that 93% of families who visit our campus, who are able to come here and interact with us and see our school community, actually complete the application process. So if you think about that, that means that there's something really compelling and special about being on campus with all of us. And of course, we can't do that right now. And so we're really hoping that tonight you get a good sense of the authenticity. You'll hear me use that word a couple of times, probably over the course of the evening, the authenticity of Mercersburg and what makes us unique. I'm going to really want to talk about two elements. There's so much that I could speak of that I think sets Mercersburg apart. And I'm going to start actually with a little bit of a story. So I had the opportunity today, and so it's been on my mind actually, and you guys are the first, actually nobody on this call knows about this. I had the opportunity today to spend an hour and a half with a gentleman by the name of Floyd Robinson. And Floyd Robinson was the first Black teacher at Mercersburg Academy, and he came to us in 1968, and he stayed for 7 years. And he has maintained a very strong connection to members of the class of 1972. And so through talking with some of those members, I got connected to Floyd, and I spent an hour and a half talking with him today. And what it made me reflect on is something that I think is really true about Mercersburg. He talked about the joys and the challenges of what it was like to be the first Black teacher at Mercersburg in the late 60s and early 70s. But what it reminded me of is that Mercersburg is a community from our founding to today that has never been afraid of change, has never been afraid to face what's happening in the world and to say, what does that mean for us as a school? And what do we need to be doing to make sure that we're best serving our community? And to hear Floyd talk about his experience and the bold innovations that were happening for the time, right? Racial integration, gender integration. We were actually, the head of school at the time, William Fowle, he made the decision early on to not have our students who were scholarship students to be serving in the dining hall. We were really out ahead of some of those social movements and not afraid to go against the grain. And you can imagine that we had some alumni in our community who were skeptical of some of the changes that were happening. And I think that it goes back to our founding with Dr. William Van Irvin, all the way to today. And it's really, for me, when you think about what's going on in the world today with even in our own country, the racial and political divides, a global pandemic, and frankly, an ever-changing world in education, that this is a moment where you want to be part of a community that's not afraid to make bold change and reflective of what's going on in the world so that we can best serve and prepare our kids. At the same time, what I love about Mercersburg is the core of the place, the ethos, the DNA, the heart of it never changes. Our values were established at our founding and they ring true today. And there's two elements of the mission that I want to emphasize. So we talk about this balance between individual humility and collective pride. And, when you think about humility at a school, you wonder how that manifests itself. Well, I can tell you how it doesn't. If you were on our campus, you would walk around this school and you will say, this place is unbelievable. Like the facilities, the programs, the breadth of what we can provide is truly not humble in any way, shape, or form. And at the same time, the way in which our community interacts with each other, how our faculty interact with our students, how our students engage with the program, there is this sense of putting the other before the self. And I think that's really something that's unique in our school culture and something that we wish to continue to cultivate. The other part of the mission talks about this balance between independence and interdependence. And in a world today, I think that's really critical. As parents who are on this call, you're thinking about, why would I send my kid away to boarding school? And one of the reasons is because you want them to develop that independence, that ability to stand on their own 2 feet, do their own laundry, navigate their own relationships, figure out how to solve the problems that are going to face them on their own. At the same time, we really value the interdependence, the recognition that if we aren't working together as a community, then we're not going to be successful. And I think you see that when you step foot on our campus. And I think that's reflective of the success that we've had during the pandemic and some of the exciting programs that we've initiated, the way in which the students have really risen to the challenge. And it really still feels like Mercersburg. It looks different in a pandemic, and Ryan will probably talk about that, but we also feel like there's a lot of elements that still feel like it's our school. And so there's so much that you're going to hear from us tonight, and we hope that you'll just walk away with a sense of excitement about the authenticity of our school and what we have to offer you, and that we know we're not going to be able to answer all your questions. This is just the beginning of that relationship and that journey, and that there'll be plenty of folks available to be able to guide you forward after this evening. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Quentin McDowell, who will introduce himself and our other panelists.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. That was great. And I agree. I think that there's no way that you're going to get all of Mercersburg in an hour. It's impossible. This is year 14 for me, and I'm still lapping up all that Mercersburg has to offer. And I think it's really important to be able to write down your questions tonight, be thinking about what else you need, who else you want to connect with other than the people you see in front of you tonight. So my name is, again, is Quentin McDowell. I'm the Associate Head of School for External Relations. This is, as I just noted, my 14th year at Mercersburg. So been here for what feels like a minute, but it's been my children's entire lives. And could not imagine being anywhere else. And with us tonight, we have some great people. I would normally start by introducing our student representative first, but I'm going to save the best for last, if that's okay. And then I'll let him take over once we get to that point, to talk a little bit about sort of what makes Mercersburg special for him. So to start another way, you obviously just heard from Katie Titus, our head of school, and the others we have on the call tonight is Chris Howes, our assistant head of school for student life and culture. Chris has been an amazing addition to Mercersburg, has really brought with him a completely different way to look at how to student life offices, deans of students who are typically responsible for a lot of discipline. How do you make that into something that feels like a meaningful, connected, character building venture coming out of that office, and has completely revolutionized the work we do with our students in student life. Most recently leading conversations about how to engage in dialogue with dignity as we built up to the election. Just really thoughtful, important. They call them soft skills, but I'll tell you right now that we watch these things closely. These are the skills that are going to be the most important as we send our kids out into the world. So glad to have Chris. And then Dr. Julie Maurer, who's a class of 90, as well as a multiple year parent. Julie is our associate head of school for school life. She will not boast much about herself. That's her modest nature, but you should know, like if I can tell you anything about her doctorate, it was in non-destructive methodologies for analyzing critical titanium aerospace components. Just the fact that I remembered all those words is pretty impressive for me, let alone to be the one who then was going on to Moscow and Tokyo and presenting her work at national and international conferences. So we're thrilled. Julie is in her 20th year at Mercersburg and is the architect of so many things we have here, including an award-winning and almost unparalleled high school robotics program that competes internationally every year. So I did warn our panelists tonight that I'd be boasting about them a little bit. So it's very unusual for Mercersburg. We're a really humble community. Also with us tonight is Leela Woody, who's one of the rock star faculty members that we have at Mercersburg, who teaches in the English department and is also our interim director of diversity, equity, and inclusion, a role that she has most willingly stepped forward to take on. And as somebody who's part of that group, I can barely keep up with Leela. She is just amazing and doing so much and so good for our kids, and they're really loving it. And I think feel that real sense of being heard and being seen and being known on our campus. And that doesn't happen without a lot of intentionality. So Leela, we're really thrilled that you're here with us tonight. And then Rick Hendrickson, who's our interim dean of experiential learning. If I listed off all of Rick's former titles at Mercersburg, I would be the better part of this hour, but everything from director of athletics to director of summer programs to an English teacher, wrestling coach, football coach, has done it all here and done it all amazingly. He was the one who trained me when I took over in summer programs. He's been an incredible mentor, an incredible colleague, and I think has a lot of insights into what happens in the time that exists after school ends. And that's a really important frame of time for us in boarding schools, right? They often say the big difference is what happens after 3 o'clock and before the kids go to bed. Then we also have Kristen Vickery, class of 88, who's also a parent of a class of 2018 graduate, and then a class of 22 student who's currently with us, Kate. Kristen is the co-chair of she's just the absolute boss, our White Key Executive Council, which is our parent society, and she's amazing. She's also the director of grassroots and political advocacy at American Academy of Physician Assistants and does a lot of incredible work down in DC, does just amazing things. And in true fashion is also an incredibly committed parent. We've really enjoyed having in this role. Kristen was adding up the meetings that she was at a couple weeks ago, and she was like, sent me an email, I think unintending to do it. I called her and I'm like, I think we should probably be putting you on the payroll. You're doing a lot of Mercersburg work. So thank you for being back here again tonight. And again, like I said, best for last is Ryan Bland, who's our student body class president. Ryan is a truly, truly remarkable and special young person. I will say that we're lucky in that we have a number of kids, 444 of them to be exact, that we love and adore and think the world of. Ryan is just such a great epitome of what it means to be a Mercersburg student, committed, high character, high values, great academics, but also just involved in so much, dipping his toe in everything, truly taking advantage of the Mercersburg boarding experience. So I won't go on any longer. I know I can talk forever. I'm really proud of the people that are on this call tonight. And I think if you were to dip into any other facet of our community, you'd find like-minded and like historical people here too. So Ryan, I'd love to hear from you. If you could kick us off, we want to hear from your voice. What makes Mercersburg special? And Kristin, I want you to be ready for that same question after Ryan's done. So maybe give us 1 or 2 minutes. What is it that makes it special here for you?
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be with you tonight, although in a virtual setting. I think what makes Mercersburg special for me, and I think especially this fall term that we've just embarked on has really shown, is I think the people really make Mercersburg so special for me. I'm so used, like my past 3 years, with everything being normal. We took a lot of those things for granted, and so now in this this past term, when lots of things have been different, we've really seen the importance of like how much we enjoy like being able to go to other floors and see our friends and interact. And you should have seen the day the dining hall opened for indoor dining. Like it was like a mad rush to grab those seats. So I think really that for me, the people make the place. And again, so happy to be here, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that come my way.
Awesome, thank you. Kristen?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Vickery. We're from Alexandria, Virginia. And like Quentin said, I have a junior in college. He goes to the College of William and Mary. He graduated from Mercersburg in 2018. And his sister, Kate, is currently in 11th grade at Mercersburg. And Mercersburg has just been so transformational for both my kids in very different ways, but equally transformational. You know, Thomas, I think, was able to find his voice and find himself on the campus, whereas Kate is more finding her people and her experience. She's a pretty high caliber athlete, and before Mercersburg, we were focused on sports, and she pivoted and said, I'd like to go to Mercersburg where I can do sports, but I want to explore other things. And so it's been just a great experience for both. You know, in the boarding school world, you say, you're not sending your kids to a place, you're sending them to people. And I think at Mercersburg, that is so exactly true. There are 100+ adults on campus who have a huge stake in my kids' success and happiness and growth. And we've been so pleased, and my kids are so thrilled. Kate's so thrilled to be back at school after a long spring and summer. There's no place she wanted to be come September than back on campus. And we've been really pleased and proud with the way Mercersburg has set up the protocols to get the kids back onto campus safely. And the last week, she comes home next week and I get to hug her. It's been 3 months. I've never been that long without seeing her. And I just can't wait. So thanks everyone for joining us. If you have any questions from the parent perspective, please don't hesitate to reach out. Anna can give you my direct email address. Thanks, Quentin.
Yeah. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Ryan. So just a little bit as we go into the question and answer portion of this evening, I want to remind everybody that at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button. You can jump in there and ask any question you want of our panelists. We do have a number of questions that were submitted ahead of time, but happy to go with the flow and add questions as they seem to fit in. Again, we will not get through all of them, but we'll do our darndest to do so. And I see Samantha Harvey, thank you for submitting a question already, and we'll get to that. And we will also have the opportunity to type answers. So you can actually go into the Q&A section. If you go into the answered tab, you can see any questions that have already been asked and the answers provided for those. I will tell you a little secret. I think you can even submit your questions anonymously. So if you're feeling a little tentative, no worries, or you've got a question that you feel is a little bit uncomfortable, just ask away. We will do our best to answer it, and no names need to be attached. So I'm actually going to start with Chris. And Chris, I'm hoping in your role, you can speak to the audience tonight about what makes the Mercersburg culture unique. And now, Ryan, I'm going to put you back on the spot again, buddy. I'm sorry, but part of the reason we have a student here is to keep the adults in the chat in the Zoom accountable. And I'd love to hear from Mr. Howe's perspective, but then from your perspective in terms of the elements of the culture that are really important for you to think that you think that our prospective families will want to know. So, Chris.
Thank you. My brow may have looked furrowed earlier while people were talking, because this question, to be fully transparent, was posed to me while people were talking. And so I was pondering what I was going to say while at the same time listening to everybody else. And then that was making me intimidated because everybody spoke so eloquently about all the great things about Mercersburg. So then it made me nervous. But I think I have my authentic response to this is, and I shared this earlier in a session with the students this morning. I've worked at a number of different schools, day schools and boarding schools. And what makes Mercersburg unique is that students can really be themselves here and be accepted for who they are as individuals. that independence of a kind of self-exploration is really celebrated here in a way by both the adults and students, in a way in which a kid doesn't have to fit into a group. They can just be who they are and are just accepted, and they find their people, but their people aren't often the same as them. And it's really unique in that way versus some other schools. And I say this because I was having a conversation with my wife today on the phone because I didn't get to go home. And we were talking about one of my twins who's in 5th grade and kind of struggling with friends and things like that. And my wife was immediate to say, if she can eventually go to Mercersburg Academy, that's where she'll find her people. And it just speaks to that idea of being able to be who she is and being able to, and people will find her and accept her for that. And it's kind of a beautiful thing to have a school like that, in a way in which you can be challenged academically, be challenged intellectually, but not feel like you're in a competitive environment where you don't feel comfortable, you don't feel safe. And that's what Mercersburg is. So that's how I would describe the culture of the community.
Thanks, Chris. Ryan, your thoughts on that? What makes the culture unique?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, like what makes the culture unique is just how many things like people are involved with. I was talking to my friend the other day while we were eating lunch on the quad, and out of the blue, I was like, do you know what my favorite thing, or one of my favorite things about Mercersburg is? And I said, it's that some of our greatest athletes are also some of our greatest artists. And I feel like that's not something that you see at a lot of schools, or that's not something I was really exposed to at a lot of places, but that's really, I think, telling about Mercersburg's community, in that people are amazing athletes, they're great students, but they're also artists, and you can really get involved in all three here. And I think that ability to try new things, this is coming from somebody who had never danced before in my life and now is a 3-season dancer. And that's like one of my main activities at Mercersburg. So I think like those opportunities and how people take advantage of them, and then how people make those connections through those various activities, that's really what forms this culture here at Mercersburg.
Ryan, I'm going to surprise attack you with a follow-up question. This just came through from one of our parents on the call tonight, and she asked, what kind of student fits in at Mercersburg? And I'm wondering if, from the student perspective, I think there's more value in hearing the answer from you.
Yeah. Again, I'd say any student can fit in at Mercersburg, and like closely, I think this closely relates to what I just said. There are so many ways to get involved, and I feel like through those different ways to get involved, that's where you form those different connections. You can make them through your classes, through your PGA, through the dorm, through your advisory groups. And then it's not just with students either. You become great friends with your teachers and your advisors and your coaches. And I really think that all those relationships that you form allow everyone to fit in their own special way. Like everyone has a spot at Mercersburg, and everyone really feels involved within the community and appreciated within the community. And I think that's something that's very special. And I know I've really appreciated over my reaching 4 years here.
So Ryan,
okay, I got to jump in on this one, Quentin.
Yeah.
So, and I love, Ryan, your answer is awesome. So thank you. But I also think the other side of that question is what is it, which students are successful at Mercersburg? And I think it's, you're hearing it, and I'm just going to be really explicit. Students who want to be involved, who want to have adults involved in their life, right? And really are excited to kind of jump into the community here are the ones who wind up having the most success. And you heard Chris talk about the authentic self. And, I think that's something we always are striving to create space for our students to bring their authentic self. And they've got to want to do that, right? They've got to be at a place where they're really ready to embrace community in the way that we want them to. Those are the students who are going to thrive here. That they're looking for something like that, and that they're not afraid of having adults very much connected to their lives.
Yeah, thanks for that, Katie. You know, in the admission office, we often say that the only students who we know will not do well at Mercersburg are those who try to be something other than themselves. And that's really true. It's a really genuine place. And I think our kids can see right through it. They don't really care what you have or don't have, as long as it's true to who you are and you're living your true self. So thank you. I'm going to pivot just all around the place so I can make sure we're getting all of our panelists and we're touching on lots of different topics. I'm going to shift over to Dr. Maurer and ask you, how has the school adjusted from an academic perspective and even from a programmatic perspective during this difficult year? And what innovations do you think are going to emerge?
Yeah, thanks, Quentin. I can answer. We've got actually one of them on the horizon next week, one of our biggest innovations for the year. But you know, when we had to spend the spring virtual last year because we were mandated to, right? We didn't really have a choice. One of the things as we looked ahead to this year, I know we talked about a lot in the school life team, is we just really wanted the kids back on campus. We missed them so much. And the day that they started moving back in was like such a joyful, it was an exhausting day, but it was such a joyful day to have them back. And so people worked really hard to think about how can we do that safely, and still try to maintain the things that are special about Mercersburg. So we did some major changes. We knew that we had to cohort and try to keep students in smaller classes, and we had to put in all kinds of health and safety parameters, and we did all those things. We changed our schedule to a block schedule. In the past, Mercersburg students took either 5 or 6 classes at a time all through the course of the year. We shifted that so they take 2 year-long classes now per term. And so every student is taking 2. So we could ask what Ryan's taking, but you might be in history and math, or a science class and a language class, and you'll rotate through those over the course of the year. One thing that did allow our students to do actually is have more credits. In the 11th and 12th grade years, because of the level of our academic program, we try to keep them in 5 classes if possible. And with the change to the schedule, it allowed all of our students to be able to take 6 classes. Some of our students are actually accelerating their learning. So they might take 2 math classes in a year or 2 language classes in a year. And so that has actually been a side, what I call making lemonade out of lemons, right? Some of the things that have come out of this that have been positive. So our students are walking away with a more robust academic transcript. One of the things that we also knew we were going to do from a health and safety point of view is probably not bring the students back after Thanksgiving. We had always kind of had that in our mind, that was going to be a time where they would go away for a break, come back, all the germs would be exchanged, and then it was just a chance for an outbreak to happen. And so as we looked at the time in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, but there's a chance to do something really different with that time. And so we invented the Mercersburg Intensive program. Our school year theme this year is making a difference. And we tossed this idea around in school life and said, what if we design the intensives primarily around that theme, around making a difference, and give our faculty and staff latitude to develop really creative, fresh, robust programming that might not typically be offered in a typical class, and offer that as a 1 credit intensive, and really give them a chance to dive deep into an interesting topic. And so out of that have come over 50 new classes that are being offered starting next week. Topics that you probably would never traditionally see on a transcript, but they're fantastic. And students are in very small classes, like around 5 or 6 students in a class. And they're just going to be able to, with their teacher, be able to take a deep dive into some really exciting topics. So I was just talking, I just did a podcast that's up on the website yesterday, all on the intensive program. So I won't go into it more, but fantastic work. And our teachers went through some pretty intense professional development to get ready to teach in that way over the summer. And so I would say that's one of the big, one of the big innovations, Quentin, that's come out of this. And we're really excited for that to happen. And take a listen to the podcast if you're interested in learning more about that.
Yeah, in many ways, Julie, I think we've talked about the programming here is not the same, and nor should it be, and it probably won't ever be the same again. And that's a good thing. That's okay. We're awakening what could only be likened to a bit of a revolution in education. And this is trying to take advantage of that, which is really exciting work. And who better to lead the charge? So I'm going to just move on and keep plugging along here. And Leela, I'm hoping to call on you and talk to you a little bit about your new role that you've taken on. And maybe you can speak to the audience tonight a little bit about the work that's currently underway as it relates to the diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice efforts.
Absolutely. Thank you, Quentin. So yes, that I am new to this role, and it's also important to note that this role is relatively a new position at Mercersburg. And I point that out because I think that gives really important context for knowing kind of where we are in our conversation and our work with our DEIJ, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice initiatives. We have a lot of enthusiastic members of our DEIJ committee, which is one of my roles, which is what Quentin was alluding to earlier. He is one of those enthusiastic participants. And so within that committee, that's where we're kind of focusing our work. And right now where we are is knowing that we have a mighty task here within society, but certainly also within our community of Mercersburg, of addressing DEIJ and what does that mean and what's at stake really there for our students in our community. And so within our DEIJ committee, we have subcommittees that are focusing their work on certain topics that fall into DEIJ. So an example is we have an allyship subcommittee, or we have a race subcommittee, or a gender equity subcommittee, a LGBTQ++, and so on. And so within those subcommittees, they're doing work, and mainly what they're thinking about right now is kind of within those, which are mostly social identifiers, right, for our students, how are those groups currently feeling affirmed, and what do we need to do as an institution to continue that affirmation, but also build that up more. So some of the ways that we've been doing that, or the plans that are in place right now, is actually just in the past couple of weeks, we had the launch of our affinity spaces, also known as affinity groups. And that is one of our equitable actions here at Mercersburg, to make sure that we are addressing, while we've had so many wonderful comments about the inclusion and the acceptance of individuals here, we're not going to go so far as to say that we aren't kind of within the same social bounds as the rest of the world. So we really want to acknowledge that for some of our students, the experience of being within this community, there are different challenges, and to celebrate that and lift them up and affirm that. So that's what our affinity spaces are working on. And additionally to that, we're working on kind of building some more robust cultural celebrations. So right now I'm working with the board of our Black Student Union, and for our planning for Martin Luther King Jr. Day, as well as Black History Month, I'm working with our LGBTQ++ subcommittee on some pride celebrations and things like that. And just kind of how can we normalize conversations about these topics, and how can we in that way affirm our students and also expose our students who don't share those identities to those celebrations. And I think the part that comes outside of those subcommittees is creating a foundation for the work. And that's where what my role is outside of working with that committee. And so that means that I'm doing work with people on this call, particularly with Chris Howes, having conversations with Student Life about kind of how are we supporting students, how are we responding to certain things, and really creating the groundwork and laying the foundation for this work, both in terms of a long term of what does this look like for Mercersburg in the future, while being very aware of the urgency of this topic for our current students.
Leela, awesome. Thank you. It actually strikes me that about 2 hours ago, I got off a call with leaders within our Black Alumni Association, talking about creating the network, how to make sure that they are sharing their stories, connecting with our students, creating networks for our students to tap into. So I think that there's a lot happening within our own community right here at Mercersburg on campus, and then in our broader Mercersburg community, a lot of really energized and excited folks trying to lean in pretty hard to this conversation and make sure that we're doing what we can to create an equitable environment for everybody. I heard a great quote this summer. One of our alums said, "We need to become a campus where everyone feels completely comfortable and confident bringing their true selves every day to everything." And I think that's a really wonderful aspiration there. So thank you, Leela. That's awesome. Moving on to Rick and looking at afternoons. And I'm going to ask you a fairly generalized question. I hope it will allow you to expand upon some of the work that's going on your end. But what does a normal afternoon look like at Mercersburg? And what are some of the things these families and these kids, if they come to Mercersburg, can expect to experience and see and try beyond maybe just some of the traditional activities?
It's like you just threw me a softball there, Quentin. I guess this is what I would say. If you're looking at our school and you're looking at other schools, every school touts the number of sports that they have, the number of activities that they have, the different types of activities they have, and probably their successes. There are very few schools that can match our success over the last 120 some odd years. You can walk through our hallways and you can see all of that. And what I think the difference is, we're a school that doesn't require athletics, but 82% of our kids participate in at least one sport. We're a school where a young student can come in having never danced before and decide that he wants to engage in that activity and become pretty damn good at it. Because I saw you I was at the premiere last weekend, Brian. And, we're a school that I think, programming drives need and people drive the programming. And the difference that you're going to see in what we do is in those people. It's not just in the resources. Even if you haven't been to our campus, you can go on our website, and we've got this vast array of facilities across the board, and some of the best facilities in the country, literally, in that regard. But I think it's this balance of inclusion, immersion, and excellence. If you're a ninth grader coming into boarding school, I think if you're a ninth grader going into any high school, you're still trying to figure out who you are and what it is that you have an interest in. And, one of the things that we do, I think that's really good is we'll have a ninth grader show up, or a 10th grader, or even a postgraduate, and they'll say, I'm a soccer player, or I'm an actor, or I'm this, or I'm that. And then we say, what are you really? Like, what else have you explored out here? What else have you done? One of the people that I use as an example is on our current faculty. He's our director of music, and that's Brian Morgan. Brian Morgan came to Mercersburg as a postgraduate. He was a football player. He wound up being the starting center at Duke University for 4 years. And he also is an outstanding music composer who still does original scores. Actually, I believe is working with Dr. Maurer's daughter on a current piece because she's a dancer. And Brian played football in the fall and then was one of the leads in the musical in the winter. That's not going to be every student's experience, but that's an example of what that experience can be, because we also have kids who come through the funnel and eventually start to excel at something. So, some of the highlights that we have, and we always use the word authenticity. We're going to be honest with you. We're going to be real. And this is what the reality is. COVID presented a number of challenges. We have an unbelievable head of school because she looks at challenges as opportunities. And so she challenged us to see what opportunities were there. In our co-curricular programming, what arose out of that is a Model UN program, and we've got a new director for that, and they're just kicking butt. I got to watch my language. I've already violated that rule once. Our robotics program under Dr. Maurer has grown, and now we've got another robotics instructor, and we're just going to take that. We're not going to have enough room for all the trophies. And then one of the things I'm very excited about is that we're growing an internship program that we're probably not going to call internships. I like the term fellows, because it's going to allow our motivated juniors and seniors in particular to pursue things that they're pretty sure that they want to go do after high school and maybe even after college. You add that to an emphasis with our lifestyle fitness program in working with our kids and educating our kids on the idea that fitness doesn't have to be going into the gym and bench pressing 300 pounds. Fitness can be taking a walk. Fitness can be riding a bike. And so we have this program, Lifestyle Fitness, that orients our kids towards that. And on the other side, we also have an Elevate program. So our college recruits are able to participate in a program where they not only get the background training that they need to be collegiate recruits, but also they get to specialize a little bit in their particular program. And right now, the leader of that Elevate program happens to be a Big Ten champion in the javelin for the University of Nebraska, who was part of the Olympic trials a few years ago for the javelin, almost made the Olympics. And so, it's the people that work with all of these students. We have the sports, we have the arts, some things that we also have that might be a little different. We've got a pretty significant outdoor education program, and the outdoor programming encompasses, we've got a climbing wall, but it's a curriculum. Pete Gunkelman will tell you, I don't want to do one-offs. I want kids to learn about themselves on the wall. I want them to learn about themselves in the kayak or on the trails. And I think that's really important. And then the other thing we have is an evolving community engagement program. And we moved it from calling it, community service to community engagement, because we also want to attract motivated kids who want to do something and feel that's part of what they want to do. So they come to us with the ideas. And I'm going to brag on them a little bit, because we don't keep stats on this, but I told Trisha Crocker that the glow run that we did to benefit Special Olympics this year might be the single largest fundraising that we've ever had a student group do. And they pulled it off in the midst of a pandemic with all of the proper precautions and raised like $11,000, for a cause that we're very close to, that we work with all the time as part of our co-curricular programming, that really needs that type of funding and that type of support right now. And the kids had a blast. The kids had a blast doing it.
Rick, thank you. And I hope you can infer from Rick's response just the breadth of what we offer here, and that breadth is matched with depth, that those experiences are rich and meaningful. And a question had come in about tryouts and about placement on teams, and I tried to type an answer to that, but I will just say that we try to make sure that kids who want to be involved and are excited about a sport or an activity have a chance to do that. There are sometimes some limitations to that, but that we really do try and create multiple entry points and multiple levels for students to have those experiences. And then also, recognize that we do have a number of high-end athletes that come to Mercersburg, and also trying to meet their needs as well. So we do our best to do all of that. I'm going to pivot over to Katie Titus. And Katie, I'm going to ask you a question. There's a lot of talk on our website and other places about this concept of courageous conversations. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about what does that actually mean, and how does that play itself out on our campus and in our community?
Sure. And I'll just be really honest in terms of how it all got started. It was 2017, which was my second fall. And there had been just a series of events that had occurred in the world that were pretty heavy. And I remember so vividly the moment I was sitting at lunch. So one of the things we love about Mercersburg, although it's been hard this fall because we've been limited in that, but we sit at lunch every day together in community. And I was sitting at my table with the students who were with me for that cycle. And we were all just talking about things that were happening on campus, what was going on in our classes and what was happening in PGAs and what was the event that weekend. And I had this moment where I thought, gosh, what are we missing here? We're not creating the space to allow our students to talk about what's happening in the world so that they can process it. I knew it was happening in classes, probably in many ways, but we weren't doing it as a community. And so I think I said it to the heads council on Monday, and we canceled classes on Wednesday. And we just gave the kids choice, and we had all sorts of things that we wanted to talk about, from gun control to racial violence to the political divide in our country, and kids had choice, and they spent a whole day in groups talking with faculty about what was on their minds and what they really wanted to dig into and explore. And so that really launched us into this concept of courageous conversations, that we had to be much more intentional and deliberate in creating the spaces for us as a community to talk about what's happening in the world. And so, there's a whole section on the website that talks more about this. And if you're interested in that, I hope you'll explore that more deeply. And as I opened, there's a lot happening in the world right now. And I think one of the things that, if I'm being honest, we're struggling with this year is, for our students, when they feel the heaviness of the election, or they feel the heaviness of the racial awakening and the tensions and the violence in the country, or they feel the heaviness of the pandemic, sometimes they just want to talk about chemistry class, right? And they just want to talk about the glow run on the weekend and what we're doing. And then that's okay too. And it's really being much more deliberate about when we want to embrace our bubble and when we want to permeate and really get out of our bubble and think about what's happening in the world and what that means for us and our kids and their future. So we're committed to courageous conversations, which is really this ability for us to talk to each other across differences, to understand what the other side is thinking and what drives them, and to really lean into the conflict rather than allowing ourselves to just live in the spaces where we feel really comfortable, and that's the people who think like us. And I think if we don't teach these kids, this generation of students, how to do that, then we're not setting up the next generation of leaders to be much more successful than the ones we're experiencing right now in our world. So So that's a teaser, I guess.
I can't help but think with a community that represents 37 different nations, well over 30 different states, totally different socioeconomic backgrounds, with half of our population receiving financial aid of some form. We have made a huge effort to be a remarkably diverse, in its broadest terms, community. And part of that, the reason, one of the driving forces of that, is to bring different perspectives and lenses and experiences and backgrounds to the table, so that our world reflects as best we can the world outside of us. And so what good is that kind of community if it's not one that's willing to engage in difficult and courageous conversations, to share and to really see through the eyes of others? There's so much research that exists about the power of connecting across cultures and across communities, that actually you're more creative, you're more innovative, there's so many benefits to that. And so if we're going to really leverage this wonderful and mosaic of a community that we have to be able to be willing to have the hard conversations, not just the fun ones. So thank you, Katie. I really appreciate that. That's been a really remarkable piece of permission that we've been given as a community to willingly and intentionally engage in that way. So Anna, I'm going to kick it over to you for what feels like maybe a little bit of a technical question, but I want to make sure we ask it because we've got prospective families on tonight, of course. Can you share some of the high level important changes that have occurred? Some just naturally, but many of which are recurring because of COVID. I think we need to recognize that, you and I have talked to a lot of prospective families and consultants and others who talk about, if the SSAT isn't required, do you really mean that? Or are you hoping we'll send it and you're just trying to get along with the rest of the group? I think our decision to go much earlier than any other school, and that decision is evidence of our stance, but maybe talk a little bit about some of those high level changes.
Yeah, certainly. I think this year is very different for our applicants, but at the same time, there are a lot of things that are really similar and the same for us. And so one of the things that's different is that we extended our application deadline from January 15th to January 31st, because we know that a lot's changing. As Katie mentioned in the beginning of this call, you may just now be coming to the idea of applying to boarding school. And there's this sense of urgency then to complete the process. And so we just wanted to allow people to have a little bit more time to get their teacher recommendations in and everything completed. On that note, teacher recommendations, I know there's a lot of concern around, I'm in a virtual setting this year. My teachers don't know me. Can I submit recommendations from last year? Absolutely. I think that we encourage you to have a conversation with the admission counselor that you're working with, just to talk through some of those concerns that you might have or questions, because we might ask you to submit the recommendation from your English teacher this year as well as from last year. But we've made extra recommendation forms available on our admission portal. But we're happy to help you with those specific questions if you have them. Quentin mentioned that we are SSAT test optional this year. In fact, all test optional for applicants for grades 9, 10, 11. Those who are applying for a postgraduate year, we think that you probably have a PSAT or an SAT or ACT that you could probably send. But if you don't, please let us know. We decided to be test optional in late July, August, well before we knew what the actual SSAT at home test was going to look like. And it's true. We are not expecting a test. We really do mean that it is optional, and you're not going to be at a disadvantage if your child doesn't submit a test. We're working with our academic office so that they're prepared to review review materials that you submit, knowing that they won't have an SSAT score that they could reference for class placement. So please don't worry about the test. We know that it's definitely a challenge to take it this year. We're primarily doing virtual interviews, and that's something that's not new for us in our office. We do Skype interviews and Zoom interviews with international students every year, but it is different for you because you're used to coming to campus. We will have on-campus visits available next month when our students aren't here. So if you're curious about scheduling an on-campus visit, just call or email our admission office. And so I'll direct you to the how to apply page on the admission website to see all of the things that I just went through here. But please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or concerns about the application process.
Yeah, I will say that that's what we do. We're here to help you navigate this process. And one of the things I take a lot of pride in with Anna and her team is that we're not just here to help you through Mercersburg's process. We're here to help you through the boarding school application process and really to truly understand, is this the right decision for you? How can we help? How can we support you? We never believe that every student we interview is going to be a perfect fit for us. Nor do we think that we're going to be the top choice for every student who comes through the doors. We know that we get more students than we can take. We really enjoy our favor in the marketplace, but we also, our biggest focus is how do we help kids get where they're going? And if that happens to be Mercersburg, then that's fantastic. But our hope, and we got into this not to just line Mercersburg's seats and tables, but to make sure that kids are really helped and know what they're going to do next year. So speaking of which, Kristin, I'd love to hear from you. I always feel so bad. I want to ask a million questions. I wish that everybody had 5 hours to be on tonight. We could certainly do some serious damage, but you have 2 children who come to Mercersburg, and set aside the fact that you're an alumna, right? Because that was, a number of years ago, and then school has changed, and you're different parents than your parents before you. But what was it that resonated with you about Mercersburg? And I think, you have 2 different yet equally amazing kids. One I got to coach and one I get to see in the dorm all the time. How did you come to make this big decision for each of your children?
Thanks, Quentin. So you said I am an alum, and that's true. In the early 80s, I came to Mercersburg to interview from West Texas. I was at a really, really large public high school, over 2,000 students with football players and cheerleaders and cliques, lots of cliques. And I walked onto the Mercersburg campus, and every person, to a person that we passed on the sidewalk, said, "Hi, hi, hi." Everybody greeted me. Students who didn't know me, everybody greeted me. And when I enrolled at Mercersburg, I realized what a kind community it is. That is really sort of the defining aspect of Mercersburg in the 80s, but also today. It is the community that your students will be entering into. As Quentin said, both my kids are very different, but the one thing that I knew that was going to happen in Mercersburg for them was that they were going to expand their horizons and push their comfort zones and try new things. They both went to the same K-8 school. They both had really great options for high school. They were going to get a world-class education regardless of whether they stayed in the DC area or they went to Mercersburg, that education. But what differentiated Mercersburg from these schools was they're going to be part of a community for life, a community that's diverse, a community that is challenging, that is authentic. And it really pushed both kids to look outside their comfort zones. Thomas was a typical middle school boy, and he needed some propping up and didn't really know how to organize himself and needed to learn in a supportive atmosphere how to get his stuff together and how to be successful and navigate, so that when he got to college, where there really isn't a lot of support, that he was able to do those things. His sister is really super type A and driven, and she needed, she's learned in these 3 years to look outside of her comfort zone and try new things and relax a little bit and not be afraid to fail. And because there's that support at Mercersburg, and if you do, you pick yourself up and you try something new. And as I said at the beginning, it's the community and the adults and the faculty and the coaches and the school minister who are all there for the kids. We had a death in the family shortly after Thomas's 10th grade year started. And I called his coach, I called Quentin, and I said, we need to talk to Thomas. And he went and he spent the evening with him. We got the school minister checked in on him a couple of days later. And these relationships continue as Thomas is in college. He still keeps in touch with these adults because that's how meaningful they are to their lives. So I had no doubts or fears or insecurities about sending my kids to this community because it is such an amazing community. So I could go on. I want to stop because I want to give other people time to talk. But if anyone wants to talk more about what it's like to send a kid to boarding school, I'm happy to share. It's a little, you're an empty nester earlier than you anticipated. But it's a really great feeling because you get to see your kids soar, and that's pretty cool. I'm not being cheesy. It's really the truth.
I know. Thank you, Kristen. It almost sounds cheesy until you live it and you're like, well, that's what it is. It's just this transformative experience. And certainly you have two remarkable young people that we feel really glad to have been able to serve and continue to serve. So thank you. Leela, that intro couldn't have been better. That response couldn't have been better set up for the question that I have for you in terms of talking through that teacher lens and through your many other hats that you wear at Mercersburg about that teacher-student relationship. You're also a boarding school graduate, and how does that relationship differ from that adult lens? And just for everyone's knowledge, there's 4 minutes left in the evening. I'm really keen on ending with our parent, with our teacher, and with our students. Those to me seems like the best way for us to end any webinar. So that's just a heads up that we'll be wrapping up after 2 more questions. But Leela, maybe talk a little bit about that student-teacher relationship.
Yeah, well, I think as much as Kristen was talking about that relationship for the kids, and that's why they come here, I mean, that's why we're here too, right? And Quentin, you bring up that I did attend a boarding school, and I've taught in other schools, and even though this schedule can be so frenetic and consuming, that's just the truth, is you come here because you want that, because you enjoy running into the student at 10:30 at night when you're like, all right, you got to get to bed, but that kid is jumping off the walls and just wants to be silly with you. And that feels so rewarding and really fuels our hearts and souls. But then also, right, I'll talk about Kate because I have had the wonderful experience of working with Kate in the dorm in her first years and as her English teacher, and to see that growth in those students and have them try things totally out of their comfort zone. And so, by Kate and I got to spend the year together last year. And so then to have this experience where I see her go from this kid who's really hesitant about taking risks in her writing and really having a stake in what she's saying, and get to the end of the year where she is actually kind of making assertions about the world that she's going to go on and talk about, and see how that interweaves with everything in her life, with her athletics and whatnot. And then I think the biggest honor for me is when students come up to you in the classroom, and sometimes they say it really nicely and sometimes they're joking with you, but they're like, well, if you wanted to, you could, come to my game tonight or something. And that is so rewarding because yes, I want to come to your game. I want to see what you're doing. And so I've been so grateful that we've been able to find ways to do that in even in the space that we're in right now, right? We were just talking about seeing Ryan in the dance concert. And so we really live for those things. It's like, I talked to my partner, like, what are we doing Saturday night? Oh, we're going to go watch the dance concert. Oh, we're going to see the play. And that becomes our life. And it does sound cheesy, but it's real. And I think that these relationships give so much to us, more than the students even know.
I love that. I get the pleasure of sharing a table in the dining hall with Miss Woody. So we get a lot of time with kids together. We argue that it is the best table in the dining hall, but not to throw any, shade. I will say it was interesting this week. I got a call from one of my former soccer players and a student at Mercersburg who's 23 years old. He's from Senegal and he's living out in Seattle, and he was driving across the country. And sure enough, all these years later, I'm like, all right, well, I've got you a hotel room at the Marriott in outside of Chicago for your drive. And he's like, oh, thanks, Dad, doing his deal. And it's amazing all these years later, how connected and a part of this network you are. And that's a really important piece of this from my lens, is to offer that what you get out of Mercersburg is not just your time here. It's a lifetime of connectivity. And if you look at the kinds of alumni we celebrate, they range from, Forbes best 30 under 30 women in finance, to governors, to just really amazing teachers and nurses and others who just are so committed to the work that they do, committed to this community. And so we all do it for the kids. I say that in the silliest but most honest way. And so as bad as I feel about not getting more than 1 or 2 questions to everybody, I don't feel bad about asking Ryan to close us out tonight. And Ryan, I'm hoping you can share from your perspective, what do you want families and kids who are thinking about Mercersburg to know about your school?
Yeah, I think the thing that's like most important and most apparent to me being on campus every day, and that I really want other people to know since they can't be here on campus with us, is that people just love Mercersburg. People are sad when we have to go. Like there are lots of tense feelings over these next few days as we're departing for like a 2 months, so a pretty lengthy period of time. And then the excitement ramps up when we get back. And even on days like today when it was rainy here on campus, people are still walking with friends, laughing, finding reasons to smile even when you're getting drenched with rain. And so I think the reason, like all those reasons that make people smile and make people love their Mercersburg experience, and they are different for everyone, but the fact that everyone can find those reasons to love Mercersburg, I think that's really important. And I know, again, if I were to list every reason I love Mercersburg, we'd be on here for another hour. But yeah, it's just an awesome place, and I think everyone really shares that same connection.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. And I want to just take a moment to thank our panelists tonight. While we didn't probably get as much time for each panelist to talk about the many, many, many things that are happening at our school and our community, it's really important for us to make sure that you see faces, that you see names, you know who we are, that this is the familiarity of boarding school. It's that connective tissue that makes these places special. And so to be able to see all these faces and know that you can pick up a phone or shoot us an email, hopefully eventually come to campus sooner rather than later and engage with us. And these are the people you're going to get to engage with and see. And then these are the people who are happy to answer any questions you have. And we'll follow up, of course, in the coming days with some information and some links to some of the things we talked about. But I want to make sure that you also know that we are so grateful to these panelists. Thank you for your time this evening, and to so many of our families who've decided to join. 50, 60 families who are on tonight with us is a really, really wonderful turnout. And so I see lots of thank yous coming through the Q&A. We're really grateful. Thank you. You have a lot of ways to spend your evenings or your mornings or your afternoons, depending on where you're calling in from. And we're just really, really grateful that you've decided to spend it with us. We look forward to connecting with you soon. I think you can feel the energy and love for Mercersburg, and hopefully you can bask in that love for a lifetime by being a part of this community. So we're grateful, and thank you again to everybody, and have a wonderful night.